At 6:37 p.m. on June 26, 2013, Kimberly McCarthy closed her eyes for the final time. Just moments before the lethal injection took effect, she whispered to witnesses in that sterile Texas execution chamber, "This is not a loss, this is a win. I'm going home to be with Jesus." 16 years earlier, on a sweltering July morning in 1997, Dorothy Booth answered her door to help what seemed like an ordinary neighbor. Within minutes, Dorothy lay dead on her dining room floor, stabbed multiple times. But the horror didn't end there. In an act that would horrify even seasoned detectives, her ring finger was severed completely, her wedding band stolen to feed an insatiable crack cocaine addiction. What drove Kimberly McCarthy to such brutality? This is the story of Texas's 500th execution and the unthinkable violence that led there. In the summer of 1997, two women lived adjacent lives on Mockingbird Lane in Lancaster, Texas, their modest homes separated by 20 feet of suburban lawn and an unbridgeable gulf of circumstance. Dorothy Booth, 71, had purchased her two-story house in 1985 during the development boom that transformed southern Dallas County. 3 years into retirement from her position as a psychology professor, she maintained the methodical routines of academic life, morning walks, afternoon reading sessions on her front porch, evening meals in her well-organized kitchen. Next door, Kimberly McCarthy faced a different reality. The 36-year-old certified nursing therapist had moved to the neighborhood in 1995, but her career had stalled the following year when she left her position at Sunset Manor, where she had provided physical therapy to elderly stroke and orthopedic patients. By summer 1997, the financial architecture of McCarthy's life was collapsing. Court documents reveal unpaid utility bills totaling $847 and 2 months of missed rent. Her landlord had initiated eviction proceedings, with a hearing scheduled for August 15th. Booth's retirement included weekly grocery trips and occasional visits from former students seeking career advice. Neighbors described her as helpful but not intrusive, someone who would accept packages or water plants during absences. She had installed new security lighting in spring 1997 after a break-in occurred 3 blocks away. Meanwhile, McCarthy had reached what addiction specialists term a crisis point, the stage when coping mechanisms fail to address withdrawal symptoms, financial obligations, and social isolation. Clinical studies indicate that individuals at this stage often engage in increasingly desperate behaviors to maintain substance use patterns. The two women's daily routines rarely intersected beyond customary suburban acknowledgments. Yet their proximity on Mockingbird Lane had created an intersection waiting to happen. Dorothy Mae Booth retrieved the Dallas Morning News from her walkway each morning at precisely 7:15 a.m., a ritual that had marked her days for 3 years since retirement. The Texas sun blazed mercilessly at 94 degrees that Monday afternoon, July 21, 1997. At precisely 10:47 a.m., Kimberly McCarthy's trembling fingers dialed her neighbor's number. The phone rang once, twice, before Dorothy Booth's warm voice answered. "Could I borrow some sugar?" McCarthy asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her mind. It was such an innocent request, the kind neighbors make countless times. Booth, ever gracious after 2 years of pleasant exchanges over their shared fence, readily agreed. The walk across the manicured lawn took mere seconds. Each step McCarthy took toward Booth's front door was a step deeper into darkness she could never retreat from. Inside Booth's dining room, 8 feet from the safety of the front door, the unthinkable unfolded. The attack erupted with savage intensity, 5 brutal stab wounds tearing through flesh and hope alike. Blood spattered across the walls like crimson paint thrown by a madman's brush. In those final, desperate moments, Booth fought for her life. Furniture crashed and scattered as the struggle raged. But McCarthy's drug-fueled determination proved overwhelming. The most horrifying detail emerged later. Booth's wedding ring finger was severed, the symbol of her life's greatest love stolen along with her final breath. Within minutes, McCarthy was behind the wheel of Booth's pristine 1995 Mercedes-Benz, the leather seats now witness to her blood-stained hands. Neighbors watched unknowingly as the silver sedan glided away from the scene, carrying secrets that would soon explode into public horror. By 2:15 p.m., security cameras at AAA Pawn Shop captured McCarthy's cold transaction, Booth's diamond wedding ring exchange for a mere $200. The afternoon became a frantic chase against invisible pursuers. At 3 different ATM locations, McCarthy desperately tried to access Booth's bank account, the stolen card clutched in her bloodied fingers. Each failed attempt was recorded by unblinking surveillance cameras, building an ironclad chain of evidence with every panic swipe. Meanwhile, Booth's lifeless body lay undiscovered in the ransacked dining room. Drawers hung open like gaping wounds, their contents scattered in McCarthy's frenzied search for anything valuable. Dawn brought discovery. At 7:30 a.m. on July 22nd, when Booth failed to collect her newspaper, breaking a sacred 3-year ritual, concerned neighbors summoned help. Emergency responders found the scene of carnage, the dining room transformed into a tableau of violence that would haunt seasoned investigators. The net tightened swiftly. On July 23rd, police descended on McCarthy's residence with warrants and determination. Inside, they discovered the smoking gun, Booth's blood, confirmed by DNA analysis, painting the walls of McCarthy's own home. Fingerprints and fabric fibers completed the damning mosaic. July 24th brought the final act. Officers approached McCarthy's door as she sat inside, cocaine still coursing through her veins, chemical evidence of her spiraling descent. The arrest was anticlimactic after such explosive violence. No dramatic chase, no final confrontation, just handcuffs clicking shut on a woman who had destroyed 2 lives in pursuit of quick cash. The charges rang out like hammer blows in Dallas County District Court: capital murder, robbery, vehicle theft. Each count carried the weight of Dorothy Booth's stolen future and McCarthy's inevitable reckoning. The death penalty loomed like a storm cloud as she sat behind bars without bond, awaiting a trial that would determine whether she would join her victim in death's embrace. In late 1998, Dallas County's courthouse hosted Kimberly McCarthy's capital murder trial for Dorothy Booth's death. 12 jurors would determine whether she faced execution. The prosecution argued premeditation, claiming McCarthy's sugar request was calculated entry, not spontaneous neighborly interaction. Assistant District Attorney Robert Johnson presented a timeline suggesting deliberate planning rather than impulsive violence. Physical evidence anchored the state's case. Forensic specialists testified that a 10-inch butcher knife from McCarthy's residence contained Booth's DNA despite cleaning attempts. Blood traces matching the victim were found throughout McCarthy's home. Credit card records showed Booth's cards used repeatedly after her death, with surveillance footage placing McCarthy at various locations. Prosecutors detailed McCarthy's post-murder actions, driving Booth's Mercedes to Dallas, pawning the victim's wedding ring for $200, and purchasing crack cocaine. They characterized these as systematic conversion of the victim's possessions into drug money. Defense attorney Mike Charlton claimed McCarthy was coerced by 2 drug dealers who forced her participation. However, investigators found no evidence supporting the alleged dealer's existence. Police interviews, witness statements, and physical evidence pointed solely to McCarthy's involvement. The jury convicted McCarthy of capital murder after several hours of deliberation. During the penalty phase, prosecutors presented her criminal history while defense attorneys argued for life imprisonment, citing addiction struggles. The jury recommended death. An appellate court ruled her confession improperly obtained, granting a second trial. The 2002 retrial followed similar patterns, with a second jury also convicting McCarthy and recommending execution. Over 16 years, McCarthy's attorneys pursued every legal avenue through Texas's complex appellate system. DNA analysis later linked her to 2 other elderly Texas women's murders, though she was never formally charged. Defense claims of racial bias in jury selection. McCarthy was black while 11 of 12 jurors were white, were rejected by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Throughout death row, McCarthy granted few interviews and maintained innocence while legal teams continued appeals. By June 2013, her legal options were exhausted. On June 26, 2013, Texas executed Kimberly McCarthy by lethal injection at 6:37 p.m. in Huntsville. She became the first woman executed in Texas since 2010 and the state's 500th execution since 1976. The legacy of July 21, 1997, lives on not in the milestone execution that followed 16 years later, but in the questions it raises about how society protects its most vulnerable members while addressing the desperation that creates dangerous individuals. Dorothy Booth deserved the peaceful retirement she had earned through decades of service, and Kimberly McCarthy deserved intervention before addiction transformed her into a killer. Both women became casualties of a system that responds to tragedy more effectively than it prevents it, leaving communities to count the cost of justice rather than celebrate its triumph.